research on things. Like, that's what I do. Like, I've been feeling some type of way for a long time. Like, I found out about, like, the Anunnakis in, like 2008. Like, you know what I'm saying? I thought I was losing my fucking mind because I wanted to know more and shit. And people would be calling me crazy. Like, it's, as far as religion and all the atheist shit, man, it's like, you know, I believe in a high source of power, but I just started straying away from that religion, even though I grew up with that religion, but it was just always weird about it. Like, don't get me wrong, like, there's some type of truth in the Bible and stuff, you know, like the story with Jesus, like, he was telling them that, you know, the people, you know, the guy y'all was worshiping was like, that's not his father. Like, his father came from a high source, and the divine, you know, it was it's inside you and shit, and motherfuckers don't believe that. And, you know, today it's just so brainwashed, and it's crazy. So it's like, once you tell them that, even you respect the religion, like, they're like, nah, fuck you, nigga, you an atheist, you don't believe in God. Like, motherfuckers get real crucial towards you. Like, so most of them religion wars, it was keeping the truth out, you know what I'm saying? Because most, you know, it was like a lot of Christian groups and shit. They wasn't just killing for territory. They was killing to get their story straight because they wanted everybody to believe only one story. And, like, throughout the years, like, shit just started, you know, the more the story get told, the more it get translated, like, through different languages, and people add a bunch of shit onto it. Like, even, like, King James, like, man, you hear a lot of people be like, yeah, I'd rather read the King James version, and come to find out, this nigga was a fucking quack. Like, he's saying, thou shalt not sleep with men, and this nigga was sleeping with many niggas, boys. I think, you know what I'm saying, before he killed his mama, he might have been fucking her. He fucked his own cousin. So it's just like a lot of contradictions, man. And I can't look a lot of things like that. But then again, I'm wrong, or I'm an outcast for doing the research. Like, you try to explain to people today about these things, you know, they go by blind faith, like, oh man, you crazy and all this shit. And then, like, Billy Carson said, like, man, there's the transcripts is in the UCLA database where you can translate these tablets. And who's to doubt the UCLA? Like, you know what I'm saying? That's a credible source right there. A lot of people go to that college. A lot of people graduate from there. But still, though, nobody don't take the chance to find out. It's just like, man, you live in the matrix out here. And you just feel fucked up because you're awake just looking at everybody being fucking robots. But yeah, those are interesting facts, though, man. I'm glad you do your research, man. We have to talk more about this.
Birds of a feather flock together. On the real, I'm glad to hear that you still studious. I appreciate that. You're going to make me spill all my knowledge out. You know what I'm saying? Which I'm not trying to, you know what I'm saying? But I'm going to go ahead. As far as Jesus, yeah, I agree with you. A lot of that shit got manipulated and translated and embellished and then shit stretched down the line. I do think that Jesus is real because of the earliest foundations of Christianity, especially like I guess you could say the legacy of bishops, etc. Like, to me, that type of stuff also don't just come out of nowhere. Like back in 2017, I was doing blogs about this book called The Origins of an Islamic State. Like, I'll read the chapter and then break down the entire chapter and then record it as a particular blog. While doing that and reading about the Prophet Muhammad even more, you know, I found out about his two grandsons. One was called Hussein, and another one was called Hussein, and I but anyway, the whole point is like that history started in the 7th century. Snowballed. You had the first, I guess after Muhammad died, you had his friend, what was his name? Abu Bakr, I believe. And then Uman, and then I'm talking about like basically the first 4 caliphs. And then later on down the line, you know, you had like the Islamic, how can I put it, the rebellions and stuff like that, like all of those earlier settlements that they conquered, starting with, let's say, Fadak. Well, actually, Yafrid, but after Yafrid and all of that, as far as like Fadak, Tame, Kabar, etc. Later on, Mecca, Najran, the region of Naj. This is not even in particular order, but the region of Naj, Al-Bahrain, which is what Eastern Arabia used to be called, etc. Just conquering all these different territories during the lifetime of Muhammad, like they would do is they would send a messenger to these oases or whatnot in towns, and basically, to put it short, give them a lay down or stay down message. If they didn't accept Muhammad's terms or whatnot, then that's when they'll get raided or invaded, conquered still, and then they'll still be forced to pay fadak, which is like basically like produce and shit like that, goods set aside for like wayfarers and things like that to distribute out as well amongst the populations, and also give some to Muhammad's faction as well. And if they did not want to convert, they'll have to pay like a tax at the same time. It'll kind of like make up for also still being under Islamic protection as a subject as well. Not necessarily a subject for the people that have been I guess conquered, to put it simply. But my whole point is all of those things happen down the line, right? And up until this day, Islam is one of the most popular religions. Not that I'm a practitioner myself. My point is that all of that history comes from a certain point. It doesn't just come out of a fairy tale story. You get what I'm saying? So, like when I think about Jesus, for example, the earliest bishops, even when you go beyond some of his earliest apostles, like the guy Paul, for example, and Peter, actually Peter, then Paul, or whatnot. No, Paul and Peter, or whatnot. Damn, fucking about Peter and Paul. And then the bishops that followed after that, all the way up until like Bishop Clement and the late 1st century, and then the following bishop down the line. If you go back and reverse chronological order, they all started from a point like the history of Christianity doesn't necessarily start from Bishop Clement and the following ones before him. All of them got their knowledge from somebody else previous to that. What made me think about that even more deeper is like this. It's a letter that was written in 97 AD. It was written to the Christians in Greece, a place called Corinth, Greece. It was like basically they was kind of like quarreling back and forth, basically on they were arguing about the translation of the Bible, or the scriptures at the time that was put together. And so some people felt like certain I guess these people that were kind of like going against at the time what was deemed the proper translations of scriptures, you had certain people that was kind of like straying away from that, so they were becoming dissidents. So this guy, Bishop Clement, he had wrote a letter to the people in Greece and basically trying to check them and put them back on point. But a part of the logic of the letter, because I read the entire thing, he was basically saying like these points or whatever, our belief system comes from a certain foundation, and this is the tradition that we have followed up until this point. And if you break away from that tradition or that, how can I put it, this particular doctrine that we all follow or whatnot, then you're like you're teaching something that's other than pure. But the logic of that makes so much sense as far as me, like the same principle of that. That's how I think about Jesus. Like, okay, all of these things go back to Jesus as far as like Christian notions or whatever. So the person of him actually existed. Now, the interpretations of him in the four main books of the Bible that I know about, as far as like Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John. And even though Mark is the oldest of all four of those books, I read all four of them before. As far as like the virgin birth and all that type of shit, it's not really mentioned in Mark, and I think it's also not mentioned in what was it? I think Mark and one of those other books, I forget. But my whole point is, I think like the Immaculate Conception and all that, I think that's like a misunderstanding and kind of like let's keep it simple, like a remixing, for example. I think it's impossible, but I think like there's a potential that Jesus may have actually been able to do some of those things that people today call like parapsychology and shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like healing people and all that type of stuff. I got a good idea on how that's done. But my point is like certain extraordinary facets of the story of Jesus may be true to a certain extent, but I think a lot of it got kind of like exaggerated and mixed up because like even during that time in the first, let's say Jerusalem, for example, the people that were contemporaries to like some of the earliest bishops, like some of those 12 apostles that survived after Jesus, it was a group of people that were Christians as well. They were called the Evians. They lived in Jerusalem. They go back as far as Emperor Nero from Rome. Now, I don't know if you know who Emperor Nero was, but he was basically like the last ruler of the dynasty that ruled in Rome during the lifetime of Jesus. But like Nero, for example, ruled from I think 54 AD to 68 AD. Now, as far as the Ebionites, it is claimed that they are traced back as far as that particular time period. But but like the earliest actual documentation as far as a mention of them was from a guy named Tertullian. Now, that's only like a couple of 100 years later. But the point is, as far as what's purported about them, being that they existed during the time of some of the earliest apostles of Jesus following his death, this is what makes it very germane and relevant to me. The fact that they never believed that Jesus was other than the human being himself. That's what the Evians teach. Now, this is what I mean when I say, you go make me give away some shit I ain't trying to speak on yet. You know what I'm saying? But basically, being that the Ebions lived or existed or traced back as far as Emperor Nero, if Emperor Nero ruled from 54 to 68 AD, that's basically only about 30 years after Jesus died. Now, 30 years after Jesus died, and all those people that still lived following his death that also taught his philosophy or whatever, it's interesting, even though they traveled to different places in the world, such as Rome, etc., as far as in the place where Jesus is from, these people also follow his doctrine, but they did not accept the writings of Paul, according to some of the earliest Christian, I wouldn't say saints, but some of the earliest Christian philosophies like Tertullian and those people. According to some of them, the Epions did not, like they practiced, like they believed in Jesus and all of that, and they followed his doctrine, but they didn't believe in the interpretations of, they didn't consider the writings of Paul, for example, to be valid. And that's when I read that shit, man, I was like, that's fucking important. I was like, that's real interesting. And then considering like the context during that time, especially where they lived at, I'm like, that's very not to kid it, but that's very adversarial for them to be like contemporaries. So these people actually live where Jesus was from. Now, granted, some of these other dudes who studied under him that wrote books that was published in the Bible, and some people claim that they're the authors of these books. The point to me is, for these people to have existed during that same time as some of the guys that kind of like further conveyed or further taught some of Jesus's teachings, it just gave me a little bit more clarity on why, like when people say like the Bible is exaggerated or stuff like that, to me that provides a little bit more historical foundation as far as I don't want to say justifying, but kind of like a great intimation within itself on why there's obvious exaggerations in the books of the Bible and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? That's how I look at it. Like I say, I believe that Jesus existed, but I think it's a lot of things attributed to him as far as the tale of his life that's kind of like remix. I think it's a lot of shit that people don't understand. Like the like Arius, for example, he wrote a poem. It's really a book. It's a piece of literature. It's full of stanzas at the same time, but it's called Thalia, and he wrote it in 323 AD when they were going back and forth with, like when there was like Christian rivalries and many different Roman territories, especially Egypt at the time, because they was going back and forth as far as the interpretation of Jesus, because you had three main interpretations during the 4th century, but actually during that time and a little bit before that, but at that time, Arius, for example, based on what I read and Thalia and etc., he was basically teaching that Jesus was not, I believe that he was teaching that Jesus was a human being and that Jesus is, how can I explain it? Because, during that time you had the Western bishops and then you had the Eastern bishops. All right, many of the bishops in the Western territories pretty much taught what we all know to be like the commercial interpretation overall today, that Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit are, how can I put it, separate, but put it like this. Jesus, like they're separate, but they're the same. But at the same time, Jesus and God is like, both of them are eternal, basically. And then you had like the Eastern bishops that taught that Jesus predates time, but that Jesus comes after God at the same time. You know what I'm saying? That's what the Eastern bishops taught. The Western bishops were a little bit more radical in that. But anyway, the whole thing is, as far as like during that period when Arius was alive, him and the Archbishop of Alexandria was going back and forth. You know what I'm saying? So it was riots, there was calls, there was all kind of shit going on. They had the bases established too, but throughout the Roman Empire, various territories, this was like the main quarreling as far as the Christians that was going on is the interpretation of Jesus, whether him and God is one and the same, and whether or not Jesus predate time, etc., and then the logos and all of that, and what the logos exactly means. It's real deep. I think it's real deep. But my point is, like I say, I think that Jesus, I think Jesus historically existed. I think there are mystical truths surrounding Jesus. And I think those truths can be fully unraveled, especially all of the historical hints that I read about that I really don't want to break down because I'd rather blog further on that. You know what I'm saying? But I did do a blog called Areas in His Interpretation of Jesus where I went deep on it. But I don't think the existence of Jesus contradicts my personal view at all. I actually think it complements it because, like I said, I believe in metaphysics and all of the truths of parapsychology and shit. And I believe some of those things were done by him. But I guess people break things down based on their own brain, how they understand the world and their experiences. And I think that happened with him as well. And I think there's a big possibility that many of his apostles that taught his philosophy I think there's a possibility that many of the apostles that taught his philosophy, I think that, you know what I'm saying, there's potential that they got some things wrong, you know what I'm saying, or unless some people took those writings and as you said already, you know, people kind of like stretch the truth a little bit. Either way, down the line, I think shit got mixed up and it's so obvious to me. Like I said, when I read certain, like for example, the Ebions, another word that they're called, well, another way to say their name is Ebionites. You know what I'm saying? So it's both EVYONS and then EBIONS or whatever. And the Ebions or the Ebionites predates the Nicaeans, basically. They later on actually split into the Nicaeans and other Jewish religious groups or whatever, and so forth. But the Ebions or the Ebionites are very fucking interesting because I think they give, like, that history gives some of the greatest motherfucking hints of the historical Jesus and why, you know, some of the notions as far as like the Bible being exaggerated may be true. And again, you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna say it now because I already spoke on it, but man, those are blogs I'm gonna do, like for example, the Ebionites, because there's other Christian writers during that time that spoke about them. So, like, I want to do a blog where I go a little further and dig a little further and look up dimensions and shit and then compare them. Just like the historicists, like, for example, all of those 12 books that mention Jesus, the story of Jesus, right? The Matthew, Luke, John, and the Mark. You know what I'm saying? It's never been definitively proven who are the authors, like who actually authored those books in the first place. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? What I like to do is I like to read the actual books and then I go read the historicity objectively during that period, and then I go look at people that actually put shit out there, and that's how you're able to kind of like go deeper down a rabbit hole and get like the closest to the most objective facts on the subject. You know what I'm saying? So again, the Ebionites, the insights that they provide, even though, like I say, people mention them. Like I say, even though people mention them as far as the Ebionites, about 200 years after the fact, that's still a mention because even like the book that I referenced, The Origins of the Islamic State, that I read a lot of history about Muhammad from, that book was only, how can I put it, like compiled or pieced essentially written 100 years after Muhammad's life and then published another 100 years after that. So you're talking about coming out in the 9th century AD. So that's basically 200 years later after the fact, but it's many, like the Ebionites, it's basically the same principle. Like mentions of them, the earliest documented mentions from them, from many different Christian writers back in the day. I'm talking about like the heretics as well. It's about the same time, about 200 years later after that. But still, even like the letter to the Corinthians of Greece, for example, that was actually in 96, not 97. That was written to those people in 96. Again, if you compare the time frame, that's only 60 years after the life of Jesus. So going back to that main point that I'm making, there's a chronological timeline there. You see what I'm saying? Bishop Clement died in 97 AD? That's only a year later. Bishop Clement was the, let's see, Peter Paul, like 3rd or 4th bishop or whatever. But again, when you go in reverse chronological order, it traces back all the way back to Jesus. Now you see why I say like historically Jesus did exist. Now the interpretations of him is another story. And again, I'll point out the Ebionites or the Ebion to me is like a good ass map or a good ass hint or a good ass intimation or a good ass place to start if you're trying to figure out what actually was the truth and what actually did happen during Jesus' life and what's more than likely true as far as like what's written, as far as his philosophy that's broken down in the Bible. When you read the literature of other heretic Christian writers who mention them, or Christian writers period, who mentioned them 200 years ago, and you break down what these writers as well believe. For example, Tertullian, he believed that Jesus was a human being as well. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of people down the line, even the people that got the Arius and had got his philosophy from, or that he was taught from. That guy also didn't believe that Jesus was a human being. Well, he believed that Jesus was a human being, but he believed that like some of the things that Jesus was able to do, some people might call it the Holy Spirit. I like the word paraclete. It's almost like the will of God was fused with the will of Jesus. So therefore, like he was able to do extraordinary things. To me, that makes sense. And again, going back to the Ebions or the Ebionites, when I think about what they believed in as far as him being a human also, and them also questioning the validity of some of the earliest writers, like in Apostle Paul. And I say that because I'm not a Christian practitioner strictly myself, so when I read about them questioning his validity as a writer and being that these people from where Jesus come from and they were poor, to me, that's almost like, it's like you got something there. You get what I mean? So anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. You know what I'm saying? That's what I think so far. But hell yeah, man, we can talk about this shit all the time because I got a lot more to say.
He battled other MCs, including a then unknown rapper from Yonkers named DMX.
We went at it, and I was reaching for my shit. He really had me reaching for my shit.